rolling right into it. Today we're going to have a presentation by the Kansas Corporation Commission by Mike Hamey, Director of Transportation there. Welcome to the committee, Mike.
Thank you. As stated, my name is Mike Hamey. I'm the Transportation Director for the Kansas Corporation Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be here on behalf, to present to you on behalf of the staff of the Kansas Corporation Commission. Before I get started today, I would like to introduce my colleagues that are here with me this afternoon. First, Gary Davenport. Gary manages our education and compliance programs. He has 10 special investigators across the state and a public service administrator that he manages. Does a great job. Gary is well known across the country for his knowledge of the federal motor carrier safety regulations and state law. He helps regionally, not just in the state of Kansas. And next is Jared Smith. Jared is our executive, yes, public service executive. Thank you, Gary. Jared has been an investigator for many years. He is very knowledgeable in the rules and regulations, inspecting of motor carriers. He is part of our succession training plan, training to be the next deputy director at some point. And then our attorney, transportation attorney, Hassan Latif. We have been spoiled with Hassan. He has been with us for 7 years. When I first started in 2020, we would usually get a new attorney every year to train up, and that created some issues, especially dealing with all the adoptions of our rules and statutes and just general knowledge of motor carriers. And then last but not least, our executive director is here this afternoon, Lynn Retz. Lynn has been a tremendous resource for us, a lot of support for our division, so we appreciate everything she does for us. And with that, the KCC, I just want you to know the KCC is the lead agency responsible for regulating motor carriers in Kansas. As such, we understand the importance of teamwork. We work very closely with the teams and members of the Kansas Department of Transportation, Kansas Department of Revenue, Kansas Highway Patrol, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and the motor carrier industry. Working together, we are making a difference in reducing the number of fatalities, injury and fatality accidents on Kansas motorways. Before I get into the presentation, I'd just like to give you a little bit of a snapshot of our division. The KCC I mentioned, Gary manages the education compliance program. We offer free seminars twice a week. These are virtual seminars. Motor carriers sign in at their convenience. They watch them from their home or office. They're about a 3.5-hour program, depending on questions and answers. We also have, I've mentioned, 10 investigators that do compliance reviews, investigations of motor carriers. We have a K-Trans system that we offer intrastate operating authorities, private permits, and 2 public or for-hire motor carrier authorities. And then we also manage the division's interstate registration, called the Unified Carrier Registration Program, which I'll get into in more detail in the slide presentation. So with that, I think I'll begin the slide presentation. It works. So the core function of the division, as lead agency that regulates motor carriers in Kansas, our core functions begin with our statutory authority. We are charged with maintaining the statutes that apply to motor carriers. It also really forms the structure within the structure within that we operate within. Our administrative regulations, it really focuses in on the violations noticed at roadside and through compliance reviews to help us deal with those specific trends of noncompliance as part of our program. Our education and compliance programs, our education is really the foundation for everything we do. We have created a culture in which we believe, and our investigators, our staff, believe in educating before you regulate. And we've truly developed that culture, and it's paying dividends for the state of Kansas. Our compliance review programs, as I said a minute ago, we perform comprehensive compliance reviews on motor carriers. We're statutorily required to follow up on all public or for-hire motor carriers within 18 months. We do have an agreement with the Highway Patrol. They perform the federal new entrant, And a new entrant is a motor carrier that has gone onto the federal database and applied for an intrastate or an interstate DOT number. It's really selecting the commerce is what it boils down to. Intrastate means you're going to operate wholly within the state of Kansas. Interstate is going to go in and out of Kansas, or they're going to haul in the state of Kansas point to point a cargo like mail. That would be considered an interstate product, even though the motor carrier would never leave the state. So we perform those programs as part of the compliance. The Kansas Trucking Regulatory Assistance Network, KTRAN, that's where the motor carriers can go online at the convenience of their home or office 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and apply for the different types of authority. Private permits, the two public for hires that I talked about. The first being the public service, that's general commodities, which is everything other than household goods and passengers. The convenience necessity application would be the ones that would transport the passengers or convenience or household goods. Those would apply for that type of authority. The next is the Interstate Registration Program, the UCR, and that really applies to the interstate motor carriers that leave the state. The UCR, it replaced the single state registration program in 2007. The single state registration program applied to the cost of one truck at that time was around $270. The UCR began at $76, and through the process of things that we've done here in Kansas, we've been able to reduce those fees by almost a little over 46%, and they're now paying $41 for 1 to 2 vehicles. The difference in the UCR and the single state was simply that the single state applied to for-hire motor carriers. The UCR applies to anybody that operates in interstate commerce, private motor carriers, exempt for hire. So a farmer operating interstate commerce will be subject to these fees. So the only exception to the UCR would be a private motor carrier passengers. Here's a few of our primary implementing statutes. The general 66-1,108 A and B, those really empower us to do all things necessary to regulate commercial motor vehicles, motor carriers, and drivers. 108B allows us to do inspections, request information, paperwork, etc. from these motor carriers. 1,12G is specific to private motor carriers. 1,114 is specific to the public or for-hire motor carriers. 1,139A is specific to our interstate registration in the UCR. And our primary or implementing safety statute is 66-1,129. Here, if a motor carrier wants to know if they're subject to these safety regulations, they can go out there. They're either going to be exempted. If they're not exempt on that list, they'll be subject to the regulations. We could have added in 66-1,109 as well. That deals with our operating authority. The motor carrier can check there to see if they're subject to the economic or private or for-hire applications at that point. They're either subject or they're required to be regulated. The administrative regulations, we are required by federal law to make updates, amendments, and deletions to these rules. There are 41 states that, all the states must adopt the federal regulations. They have 3 years to do such. The 3-year window is becoming tougher based on the number of regulations that we submit on a regular basis. We meet annually with members of the Highway Patrol and the FMCSA to start batching our next set of regulations, preparing them for adoption. We get questioned a lot about our adoption process and how that takes place. We've even been questioned about, what kind of structures are in place. So I wanted to make sure that you understand proposed regulations are first approved by the commission. We batch those and prepare those, provide the commission a summary of what is being adopted on the next batch. Once approved by the commissioners, it goes to the Division of Budget, then to the Department of Administration, and then to the AG's office. If there are any changes within that structure there, that goes back to budget and starts back over. So it's a rather lengthy process when you consider the volumes of rules that we have to have reviewed. Once it's gone through the AG's office, it goes back then we schedule a Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, or a JCAR hearing. At the same time, we're also starting the 60-day public comment period so the industry can weigh in on these regulations, this next batch we have adopted. Once it's gone through that process, and the JCAR hearing is not an approval, there is no approval, they simply is our way to share with the legislature what we are doing. We're very specific about that. Hassan, as I mentioned earlier, he's done a great job shepherding these rules through the process and developed that rapport and trust with the legislative committee there. So it's been a pleasure to see that. We receive compliments every time we send a batch of rules through, which is rather unique. So once it goes through that public comment period, the commission signs off on it, and then once it's in the posted in the Federal Register, the Kansas Register, it goes into law. So it's a rather lengthy process to do that, and then the process starts back over again. The education program is the foundation for everything we do. We pride ourselves on what we've been able to put together and provide our industry partners in efforts to make them successful. As I mentioned, we offer virtual classes on a weekly basis. These virtual classes are on a 3.5 hour program. In 22, we had more than 1,000 trained, representing more than 750 US DOT numbers. We offer procedures manual, which I believe is in your packet. And if you've looked at that at all, we have all of our contact information. We have all the federal websites for you to look at. Motor carriers to use to apply for a DOT number operating authority. We have flow charts in here. On page 4, we have a checklist to condense the volumes of regulations into a one-page document. So on page 4, we've really streamlined how the motor carriers can apply. If they're subject to the rules, page 4 is where they need to go, because if it references a document, we also have a page number associated with that requirement. So we've made it very simple for the motor carriers to comply with these rules. The next thing that we've done, we offer our focused trainings to industry at their request. We have companies many times a month ask for specific training. You have an investigator's map in your packet as well, so you can see where our investigators are strategically placed across the state, which limits the windshield time between their work, and we have a local resource over most of the state. So that's been a very productive part of our program, as well as these individual training classes. The next thing is our K-Trend Wizard compliance tool. This was developed back in 2017 when the K-Trend system was initially implemented. This was a result of seeing so many motor carriers not being able to survive that first year of the startup cost. So what we've done is we've taken the system and a motor carrier, a business that operates a few commercial motor vehicles, and run through this program, answer questions. Are you for hire? Are you private? Are you going to be hauling hazardous materials? Are you subject to intrastate authority, federal authority? Do you operate in the commercial zones? CDL, substance alcohol testing. It answers all those questions and gives the individual a printout. You can run through as many scenarios as you want, and you'll have this printout at the end of it. So you have an idea of what the startup cost will be and have a better chance of surviving that first year. We're seeing if the motor carriers can survive that first year, they have much better chance of becoming a long-lasting and productive company. So that's a really good tool for us, and it gets used a lot annually. And I mentioned the map about the investigators, so I won't mention that again, but they are a tremendous resource to the motor carriers in their areas. The goal of the program here with our education program is always to help new and existing or non-compliance motor carriers get started off on the right foot, or get back into compliance, or simply go for a refresher, because these rules do change on a regular basis. This next slide addresses our compliance programs. Our investigators perform comprehensive audits and investigations on motor carriers. New authorities were statutorily required to follow up on motor carriers within 18 months. I think I mentioned earlier that we have an agreement with the patrol for the new entrant. If it's a new interstate carrier and they go through the new entrant the federal new entrant safety audit and pass that, then we consider that to meet our statutory requirement. So we limit the number of times a motor carrier is investigated. And then we follow up on the other ones that are not all the intrastate public motor carriers. For calendar year 22 fatal crashes, there were 59 fatal crashes in calendar year 22 that we are aware of at this time. There may be a few more that will trickle in. Of those 59, 27 of those crashes were Kansas-based motor carriers. We follow up on all fatality crashes. 9 of those 27, so 1/3 of those motor carriers in Kansas, it appeared to be the motor carrier's fault. The other 2/3 were probably the fault of inattentive driving, the cause of a car pickup. So distracted, inattentive driving is really an issue out there right now for the industry to deal with. Motor carriers that go through compliance review and receive penalty orders. These penalty orders, once they get assessed a penalty order, they have to follow up with a corrective action plan to address the issues, how they're going to fix it. And we follow up within 14 to 18 months on these companies to make sure that they are on track and have corrected their issues. Penalty orders, one thing too I want to mention, the penalty orders, any fines, civil fines or penalty orders through a compliance review, all those fees go directly into the state general fund. The commission does not receive a dime of those monies. Commercial vehicle safety lines, the investigators, as part of their certification process, have to perform at least a minimum of 32 roadside inspections. The majority of them do around 50 for certification and competency purposes. Here are some compliance investigation statistics for this would be fiscal year 22. As you can see, there are 157 compliance reviews. The interstate motor carriers, let me mention this too real quick. If they're an interstate motor carrier, they are investigated by us, they will receive a rating, either satisfactory, conditional, or unsatisfactory. Satisfactory means the motor carrier had good system in place and was with minimal violations. Conditional, you're going to have a few either comprehensive violations, but not enough to kick you into the unsatisfactory category. There was 19 of the conditional rated reviews. Unsatisfactory motor carriers, there were 8 of those, and those were motor carriers that had numerous critical and acute violations. And if the motor carriers receive an unsatisfactory rating, they are required to send a corrective action plan into the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. It has to be approved. If it's a property carrier, they have 60 days. If it's a passenger or hazardous materials carrier, they have 45 days to get that corrective action plan approved. So if they don't get approved, then they're deemed out of service, and they are not going to be allowed to operate until they get back into compliance.
Hey, Larry, could you tell me what constitutes a violation? What kinds of things constitute a violation?
Sure, and I'll have a slide on it here in a little bit, but driver files, hours of service, maintenance, substance and alcohol testing, insurance, registration, those things like that.
Turn signal light out.
Lights would be an out of service violation, yes.
And then how does your overlap compare with what the highway patrol motor vehicle people do? Where's the overlap or non-overlap there?
There's really not a lot of overlap. They are the primary regulator for the Motor Carrier Safety Assistance Program. Their main duties are to do roadside enforcement. We do enough for certification purposes, like I mentioned, to maintain a certification to do compliance reviews. So I don't think there's a lot of overlap. We work on a daily basis with them, and it's been a good partnership. Okay. So the next category there, you see the non-rated. Those are going to be their wholly intrastate motor carriers, a terminal audit, or a follow-up compliance review. Those are not rated, and there are 82 of those. The number of seniors resulting in penalties were 73%. And this is extremely high. If we were simply following up on the carriers that went through our classes, this would be a very low number. But because of the tools that we have at our fingertips now, we are focusing on the carriers that we see having issues at roadside so we can help get them redirected and minimize the chance of an injury or fatality accident. So the tools are really directing our workload at this point, and the statistics are. Some good news, the CMV Crash Statistics. As you can see, 3 years worth of accident information for commercial motor vehicles involved in crashes. Kansas is among the lowest annually in this category. I think for 19, we were number 3, the lowest percentage. 20, I think it was 4, and then 21, it was 2. But we're generally down there in the bottom third, if not the lowest. And a lot of this is attributed to our education program. And the FMCSA has recognized our program, education and compliance program, with best practices over the years. We're one of the few states that offer that comprehensive education program. KTRAN, the Kansas Trucking Regulatory Systems Network. Since the new entrance, and I mentioned earlier, the new entrance is somebody that applies for a DOT number. We send them a paper copy. We get a daily printout of the new DOT numbers. We send that motor carrier a new entrant letter inviting them to a class, inviting them to log into KTRAN to receive regulatory alerts, go through a questionnaire to see if authority applies to them, things like that. We have a messaging system in KTRAN, so we really make communication with the motor carrier very simple to do. This is where the motor carriers apply for their intrastate authorities. I mentioned the Wizard Compliance tool. We also have a feature for the drivers that are not able to meet physical requirements due to limb impairment and things like that. We have a waiver program, and we have been successful with getting a lot of those drivers back into service and able to drive. So that's worked out very well. We have more than, let's see here, skipped a bullet there, the enforcement access. So one thing I do want to mention too, the commission is putting motor carriers that are non-compliant out of service. We share that information with the Department of Revenue and the Highway Patrol so that they have access to that. And if it's for Department of Revenue, they can lock a motor carrier system. They can't renew, thus forcing compliance and getting that motor carrier redirected and on the right track. And the Highway Patrol looks for that roadside too. If a motor carrier is found out operating out of service, they're more likely going to be impounded. We do have more than 10,000 active KTRAN accounts. The number of motor carriers operating in Kansas fluctuates due to the inactivations and new entrants as a rolling number, but it's anywhere between 17.5 and about 18.5 intra and interstate motor carriers. Our Unified Carrier Registration Program, that is our main funding stream. The UCR is a federal registration program managed by the division, which motor carrier operating interstate commerce pays a fee depending on the number of commercial motor vehicles they operate. Funds collected are to be used for motor carrier safety programs, enforcement programs, or administration of the UCR. Both the Commission and Highway Patrol utilize funds to better their compliance programs. So the UCR funds is spread between us and the Highway Patrol. One important feature to note, the division is entirely fee funded. We do not receive state general funds. The UCR fees constitute our major funding stream. So it's a great feature that we're operating within. Since the federal program's inception in 2007, the fees have been reduced, as I mentioned earlier, by 46%. And this is in large part to what we have done here in Kansas. I mentioned the teamwork aspect. This is really a team approach. The Highway Patrol issues citations or civil fines to motor carriers that are not compliant with the UCR. The Department of Revenue verifies UCR compliance prior to registering a motor carrier with IRP or commercial plate if they are in interstate commerce. One thing too, the Department of Transportation just began issuing or verifying UCR prior to issuing a foreign-based motor carrier a trip permit to go through Kansas. So we have all entities really honed in on and helping us promote compliance. And the reason promoting compliance is important, enforcement is really the last area that we can improve on. The state of Kansas has helped with this big reduction. We, as a state, have always registered a high percentage of motor carriers by a state. And as such, the UCR board took notice of that and asked us to share our programs, what we do, our solicitation programs, our auditing programs. And so they sent two of our staff to 7 locations across the 7 states over about a 5-year period. And we've shared that auditing abilities, our solicitation programs, how we work with all the agencies, with FMCSA. FMCSA, didn't mention them. They actually, when they're doing their new entrant audit or compliance reviews, they are also verifying UCR. So we're really locking that in. So we're sharing how we've interacted with all of our sister and federal agencies to promote this program. And as I mentioned, states are doing a good job auditing. I'll turn to this next page to kind of highlight what I'm talking about. The UCR compliance, this is for calendar year 22. You can see Kansas is about 96.5%, and the other states are in the 80 to 85% of compliance. For 21, we're at that 99.30% compliant. We have been the highest registered state since the inception, and that's why they turned to us to help educate these other states and state auditors. A couple of things that we do, we audit motor carriers. If a motor carrier has apportion plates, they're deemed to be in interstate commerce. That's the reason you would get a portion plate. And so when a motor carrier, states have to follow up on all focused anomalies. The focused anomaly is when a motor carrier has IRP registered vehicles, but pays in a lower fee than the number of IRP plates that they have. States have to follow back up on and remind them that you have to pay for all IRP vehicles. And that's where I mentioned the Department of Revenue helping with that, and the county treasurers now also doing that same thing with the commercial plates. So it's really been a way to force compliance. And if we get the other states to the enforcement piece, it's going to really help us continue driving these fees down further, even, which 46 is still, like I said, very impressive. Now we come down to who is subject to safety regulations. Business utilizing commercial motor vehicles. So what is a commercial motor vehicle? It means a self-propelled or towed motor vehicle used on the highway to transport passengers or property if the vehicle has a gross vehicle weight rating, a combination weight rating, a gross weight, or a combination gross weight of more than 10,001 pounds. So if you're operating such a vehicle, this is where you can go to that 66-1,129. If there are no exceptions for your operation, then you'd be subject to all the regulations, the applicable regulations. Here's an example of some for-hire motor carriers and some combination vehicles. The upper left-hand corner is a small combination vehicle, barely getting over that 10,001 pound rating. The top right-hand corner is a wrecker, and it's probably around a 12,000 pound rating. The 18-wheeler there on the middle left and the rollback wrecker are large vehicles. The bottom left is a large vehicle, probably around 32 to 34,000. And then that bottom right is one of the smaller vehicles. Some of these now, like this bottom right here, you'll see at a 10,000 pound weight rating, but there's still some out there that are just over 10,001 pounds. So you have to just check each time they inspect the vehicle, see if it's subject to the rules or not. What is the CMV continued? Here are the passenger guidelines used to transport more than 8 passengers, including the driver, for compensation, or for more than 15, including the driver, not for compensation. And there's a couple examples. So any motor vehicle, any passenger vehicle over 8 that is designed to transport more than 8 passengers is subject. And then the rest of the examples are just some different scenarios to review. And last, what is the CMV continued? Deals with hazardous materials. Any vehicle used to transport hazardous materials requires a placard. And you can see the placards on these vehicles, these triangles that are on the vehicle. The triangles are to allow to really highlight what they're hauling in case it's for people, the enforcement, but also for emergency responders who are coming up on an accident, what they have to deal with and be careful how to handle the situation. We have one more definition. It applies to a commercial driver's license class vehicle, CDL. So it is designed to transport passengers or property if the vehicle has a gross combination weight rating, the same as the safety, gross combination weight rating, or combination weight rating of 26,001 pounds or more, provided the trailer is over 10,001 pounds. This would be an example of a Class A CDL. The second bullet there is an example of a heavy straight truck, and the straight truck itself has to have a weight rating or combination weighting, a weight rating over 26,000 pounds, and the towed unit or trailer cannot be over 10, or it falls into the Class A category. The bottom two bullets, if they don't meet the definition of A or B, would be a Class C commercial driver's license vehicle, and they're used to transport passengers or hazardous materials. And a lot of those utilize smaller vehicles, so they may not meet the definition of A or B for the purposes of a CDL, Class A or B. Kansas law effective April 19th. This was in 2015. The legislature took advantage of a federal variance which allows a state to exempt out a certain class of motor carrier. We exempted out the lightweight privates, and a lightweight private is a plumber, landscaper, lawn and garden, lawnmower service company, things like that. They're operating vehicles 10,001 to 26,000 pounds. They have to have Kansas registration, and they cannot be hauling hazardous materials requiring placarding. If they meet that criteria, they are exempt from all the federal and state regulations except for three. And that would be annual inspection, cargo securement, if it applies, and coupling devices have to be in working order. That is it for these lightweight privates. Motor carriers doing business in Kansas that may be subject to the regulations are as follows. Drug and alcohol testing, CDL required vehicle that I just mentioned, Part 382. Driver qualification files, 391. Hours of service, Part 395. Maintenance files, Part 396. Insurance, 387. USDO timber and accident files, Part 390. And hazardous materials, 172 through 180. Those are examples of some of the rules that you had asked about earlier, Mr. Chairman. And here's our contact information. If you ever have questions or need information regarding a commercial motor vehicle for anything, please use us as a resource. We'll get you the information timely, and it will be accurate. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Hey, Representative Proctor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that briefing. Is very, very informative. I'm asking you because you're here and you probably know the answer or not. I don't know that it specifically falls in your purview, but my town, Leavenworth, they have come to me. They're really struggling with CDL drivers for stuff like, trash trucks and stuff like that. And they were asking me to do something up here to exempt municipalities. Is that something we could do legislatively?
No. The Federal Motor Safety Administration has authority over commercial driver's license, intra and interstate. An exception like that would probably throw the state into a non-compliance phase and really jeopardize MIXAP and potentially highway funds. I know nobody wants to hear that, but it's a process. You're not the only one. ELDT training is an issue. We were asked a couple months ago. ELD training is now required for any new CDL operator to go through. It can be anywhere from a 4 to 6 week process, and it can cost anywhere from a couple $1,000 to $7,000 depending on where you go. It is an issue. Service companies like pulling units, especially with the oil field, the way it cycles. When they're high and they're going strong, there are a lot of options to get drivers. But when they stop for a while, that new startup trying to get drivers in there, it just makes it tough because nobody's ready. Nobody wants to wait 4 to 6 weeks to have a CDL driver. They want them now. They want them yesterday. Custom harvesters, are they fall into that category? So there's a lot of areas like you're talking about that have concerns with the ELD training. And that is not one of our regulations. That's actually a Department of Revenue statute. And It is an issue. It's just not a quick fix. We heard from the Department of Revenue the other day, and I think they've got a pretty good handle on it now, and it seems to be working better for them. But it's always going to be an issue. If you're in a crunch and you need a driver, training is going to put you back at least 6 weeks, potentially, depending on what class you're looking for, class A, B, or C.
And the challenge they have is they pay to train them, and then they get poached by other companies that pay them.
Unfortunately, that's exactly how it works. You're welcome.
Representative Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In previous year, we'd heard about specialty license for the CMVs and hazardous materials on specifically radioactive material, and there were enormous additional fees or something for them to do this because of decommissioning plants that were further north and that they would be crossing Kansas. Are you aware that this is actually occurring? Are people purchasing these licenses for this to occur and happen across the state of Kansas?
I have not received any calls on that, Gary. Have you heard anything, anybody? Yeah, that's not something we've had any contacts with. So I can do some research with our federal counterparts to see if they've been contacted about that and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm more than happy to do that.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Made me shut it off. She broke my train of thought. Representative Delperdang, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry for messing up your train of thought.
No, it was my ranking minority member that got me there.
First off, thanks for being here. Sure. It was last year we passed an autonomous vehicle bill. Has there been any out there? Is there any statistics at this point of anything to go on of any issues, or just looking on it if they're out there and operating at this point?
It's my understanding that there has not been any action on that yet. I'm not, other than that, I haven't heard anything really about that as far as any of them starting up in Kansas.
Mr. Heyman, could you talk just a little bit about, wasn't there a memorandum of understanding between you and the Highway Patrol as far as development of rules and regs?
Well, we have a MOU for civil assessments where they will fine motor carriers. They will assess a civil fine. It's a commercial civil fine, but they will send out the notices to the motor carriers on our behalf.
I had heard that as far as the rules and regs that needed to be developed for the autonomous vehicles, you guys were taking a part in the development of some of those.
We have met. I'm not sure where it's at. We've made some recommendations, and I know that the governor's office is reviewing those options, but I have not heard any more than that.
So what do you think the process actually is? I know this can get pretty involved, especially on a new technology like this. I mean, what's the process in place? It was my understanding the Highway Patrol didn't feel like they had the expertise to develop some of those regulations, and so they turned to you guys for help. And maybe there's someone else in the audience that could help us with that.
Well, I think the intent of the bill was to have the Highway Patrol do the roadside, be the contact for these autonomous vehicles. A company wanting to operate these types of vehicles, make contact with them, submit them an application, provide certain information, and the patrol would be the ones that would maintain those applications, respond to accidents, things like that. There are about four main areas that they would do. I think the patrol is very comfortable. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I believe that they were comfortable in that. But the bill was written very broadly, and there's some question about authority that we've been working through that I have not heard back from yet.
So you don't have any idea of what a time frame might be or anything at this point?
I really don't.
Representative Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually looking at the slide on page 10, and I'm just looking at you where you indicated that the funds collected are used for motor carrier safety programs. The division is entirely fee funded.
That is correct.
and we do not receive state general funds. And then you also talk about the fees constitute the majority of the division funding source. Is that a hindrance that it is totally fee funded versus state funding in any way?
I think it's just the opposite. I think it allows us more opportunity to be proactive and use the money to improve on our programs. I think it's a benefit.
I think it's a benefit. So I'm looking at the last one. Since the federal program's inception, the fees have been reduced by 46%. So, okay, you're saying it's a positive, but it's been reduced 46 due to the state of Kansas. So is that because you're making enough in fees, or is there some other way you're offsetting the funding?
So the way the program works, the Unified Care Registration, the 41 states that participated in the program in 2004 had to lock in all the fees they received from interstate for hire motor carriers, exempt for hire motor carriers, and interstate private. That is the money that we've been locked into since 2004, and that probably will never change. So I think it equates to, from the 41 states, a little over $107 million. The states are made whole. The rest of that money goes back. Once we've over collected and the states have received their money that they have been approved to receive, then those over collections are set aside to further reduce the motor carrier registration fees. And so the state of Kansas has helped by training other states' auditors to educate the industry, get them registered prior to the enforcement date so they don't receive fines out there. We've helped them with solicitations, how to work with their sister agencies, their federal agencies, all of that. We're doing a great job within the 41 states with that area. We're not going to be ever jeopardizing our funds, because I think last year alone, and it's always been consistently about 180 to 200,000 motor carriers do not renew. That's why I said the enforcement is really the last significant piece to continue to get those compliant or get them off the road. Because I didn't mention this because I was trying to shorten up. I had this presentation this morning. I think it went a little bit long. I was trying to shorten up a little bit today, but we're seeing, based on the data, that if a motor carrier is non-compliant with UCR, they're at least a 2%, 50% higher out of service rating for those carriers. They're also the most dangerous out there, and are probably going to be the ones that have the potential for an injury or fatality accident. In 2017, the feds initiated the first study, and it was, I think, 41%. Since then, we're seeing these anywhere from 45 to 55% that haven't paid UCR. And it's not just the first week or first day after the registration or the enforcement day started. It's those carriers that don't renew by the end of the registration year. Those are the ones we need to be targeting for safety too. Not just to get the UCR to get paid, but for safety, because of the potential for jeopardizing the motoring public. So the UCR is really, I think you're going to see the UCR. We just established an enforcement committee about 2 months ago, and I think that committee is going to be proposing at some point that the UCR be considered an out-of-service violation because of the correlation to these non-compliant motor carriers. If they see a motor carrier through a plate reader and they stop them, they know they're going to be at least a 50% chance that has an out-of-service violation with it. So that connection to safety, the UCR, is going to benefit us on the safety side. But if we get those motor carriers educated and get them to comply, then we'll continue to reduce the fees for the compliant carriers. One of the things the commission is really one of our core values too is to create that level playing field. So we receive complaints all the time from regulated carriers that are paying for safety programs, operating authority, insurance. They lose a load to, let's say, a farmer, which happens all the time. We get a call immediately because, it's jeopardizing their business. And so we go out there and create that level playing field. We either get the farmer to get into compliance or they stop operating as a for-hire motor carrier, because it's against the law, state law, to operate as a for-hire carrier on a farm registration, on a farm plate. So I kind of expanded off of what you said, but the UCR, we're not going to jeopardize our funding stream. There are a lot of carriers out there that we could be getting into the system. We annually over-collect. So I think we have a long ways to go before we ever have to worry about that. And we have been fortunate enough to reduce fees if it ever gets to that point where we are a little underfunded. And you'll see one of the first years that we have a fee increase. So it kind of is just the nature of how much we over collect. And we try to project so that we don't have to do the over collect, raise fees in the next year or 2 years. But that's a constant battle based on the number of motor carriers entering the system. It really became effective after COVID. Through 21, I think nationally, we saw about 250,000 motor carriers, additional motor carriers we normally do enter the system because of all the freight issues. And they were successful for about a year. Now we're seeing that decline because the freight's just not out there like it was through those pandemic years, early pandemic years. So
thank you very much. That was a thorough answer, and I really do appreciate it very much. And the presentation was very informative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for your time, Mr. Hamey, and the presentation to the committee. All right, committee, next week we'll probably meet on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday, it's going to be Railroad 101. We'll have both the main lines in. Mr. Hubble, if you haven't met him yet, will be doing the presentation. Then we'll also have a presentation by a member of WATCO, who is one of the largest operators of short lines in the nation. Both of those are important infrastructure for our state. On Thursday, we'll have a Turnpike 101. We'll have Steve Hewitt, Chief Executive Officer of the Turnpike here, as well as Calvin Reed, the Acting Secretary of Transportation for KDOT. So that's kind of what we got to look forward to. We won't meet Wednesday. I'm sure everybody could use a little bit of break for that. Following week, some of the things we're working on getting presentations together on is the importance of broadband infrastructure in our state. KDOT's got a middle mile program where they're using highway right-of-way to extend intersection points for internet, the fiber system. We really won't be getting into fiber to the home, more the, like I say, the broad backbone of the needs for that. We'll also have a private person here. On the 25th, we're planning kind of a 101 on road usage charges. There's some estimations that 50% of all new vehicles in the year 2030 may be powered by some source other than our normal petroleum products that we use to gas and diesel, basically. That's going to, in the long term, have an effect on our ability to fund highways. So we'll try to get up to speed on some of that. I don't really expect to take any action on anything as far as road usage charges this year, but we need to all understand some of the things that contribute to that. Also, through this period, we'll start to hear some bills and do some of that work for the people of Kansas. So if there's no further business for the community, for the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.